Hi, everybody. Welcome to a brand new episode of Dance Teacher Pep Talk. I know that I have been sort of on a leave, I guess you would say, from the podcast right now. And it was really just to make sure that I had the time to be present in the busy competition season that I'm currently in, and just a feeling of really wanting to be so present in the things that I'm a part of. And today's episode is kind of going to speak on that as well. Just some thoughts or reminders during this season about how sometimes we can get into things that we start to feel maybe become forced, or like we have to do something, or that we have to meet a certain criteria, or that there's only one way to do it, and that is when we're all in. And I guess the learning that I have been having around this particular concept is that you can show up when you are feeling inspired. And sometimes that is the content, or that is the idea or the concept or whatnot that's going to hold the most value, the most truth, the most authenticity, versus continually showing up only at a certain percentage of yourself. So today I had this feeling like I really wanted to record an episode for the podcast, and I felt really inspired for it. And so here it is. So as I mentioned, I'm really in a season right now of being present as much as I can with what I have. Competition season, as you know, can be very busy because you have, your typical dance week. And then on the weekends, you have competition. Whether you are a judge, a teacher, a choreographer, somebody who works, backstage, competition staff, all of that, you kind of know how busy this season can feel when you don't have that weekend reset time that maybe you typically have. It's just a continuous loop that is going. And now for myself right now, I have sort of taken a little bit of a step back as well in the amount of time that I'm spending at competitions, because with my children being so young, my priority or my focus has been more at home with family and getting to the competitions when I'm able to. So my schedule looks a little different, but even still, it has added a layer and a level of busyness. And so that is sort of the realization that I had when thinking about today's episode. So first off, happy spring. This episode is coming out right after the first day of spring, or maybe a few weeks after it. Honestly, I don't know. So that's when this episode is coming out. But if you have just transitioned into spring, something that I loved doing last year on the podcast was having monthly updates about things that I really like to do and to have a part of my class in each month, or like a focus for each month, in hopes that it would inspire some ideas for you as well in your classes. And what I love about a seasonal update, or like getting in touch with the season that you're in, is that it just feels more authentic. It feels more true when we're aligning ourselves with that particular energy or like those particular themes. And when we go against that, sometimes it can really feel like a struggle. Like I think about winter, it's dark, it's cold, we find a lack in motivation. We may want to just curl up in a blanket or, whatnot. And so sometimes when we're going against that energy and trying to find the fire, trying to find, the push, like, yes, sometimes it can have the effect of like getting us out of that, like needing to just like curl up in a ball type of feeling. But at the same time, sometimes it feels like really aggressive against our body that is really wanting to just find some calm. And so matching up seasonally with the energy or the themes or the concepts that are within that season, I feel can not only be beneficial to our teaching, but also to our students as well, because they're feeling it too. And, I've mentioned this before as well, but I think it's so important to make sure when we are teaching dance outside of the public school system. So, I think that's the majority of us are, in a private studio setting or whatnot. We need to also think and align with what the students are doing in their day. So like, how can we greater be a space for them to be what they need? Are they needing to let out pent up energy? Are they feeling really tired? How are their brains? Are they in a season of finals? Are they like really bogged down with a ton of information? Because if we can help to aid them in the best that we can with whatever it is that we're doing, I feel that the learning is going to be so much more deep and so much better retained. If we go against that, I think you can kind of understand, like if you had taught a class and you're constantly pushing your energy against the energy that is matched in the room, it can feel like pulling teeth sometimes. And it can feel like a struggle. And then at the end of the day, it's like, did you accomplish anything within that class? Did you feel success in that class when you reflect back and look at it? Because like I said, sometimes giving the opposite energy is the thing that we need to push us out of that funk, but sometimes it's not. And so being aware of this. So seasonally, when we think about spring, okay, the season of spring is a lot of the time a time of rebirth, refresh. The snow is melting, the ground is preparing for the flowers to bloom, the trees are getting buds on them to sprout, and it's this time of beginning. It is a start. And it's so interesting because for most of us during our season, we're probably like 3/4 of the way through right now. We had our fall, had our winter. Here we are in spring. And so to have this idea of like fresh energy, starting, beginning, it can feel like weird because we in our classes are preparing for the close. We are preparing for the recital. Our competition season pieces are hitting the stage. And so we kind of are going against the seasonal energy in this way. And so this episode, I wanted to share, some ideas of maybe how we can incorporate this seasonal energy into our classes so that we can feel better aligned. So like I said, it's a rebirth, it's a refresh. And so thinking about what is that in this season of teaching for us? So many of us might be feeling like, I do at least, feeling like in this state of limbo right now, where in our classes, we're working on recital dances. And then, in rehearsals, we're reviewing the critiques from the previous event before we go out to our next competition weekend or whatnot. And so it's this thing, like the competition pieces are done. The recital pieces are getting finished up. And it's this feeling of coming to a close, but then also the idea of like, we still want to learn. We still want to grow. This is not a time to settle. This is not a time to just kind of like sit back and watch it all happen, because I think we would miss out on a great area of learning here, or a great opportunity to push ourselves beyond where we are currently at. So for me, when I think about spring, it has this sense of fresh ideas, and we might feel like we're on a loop doing our recital choreography or whatnot, but something that's been so helpful to me is to act on the nudges or the thoughts that are coming to you, and to not be afraid to do things differently. This is a season where I feel I tend to really shift and change things up, because if I'm on a loop, I bet the dancers are on a loop too. So maybe my warm-up looks a little different, and I'm going to talk about that in a second. And maybe I flip the schedule of my class around a little bit to best benefit the dancer. And again, I'm going to talk about that in a little bit too. Maybe I'm bringing specific improv exercises into my contemporary classes. Maybe I'm bringing different material into my other classes to get students to look at things in a different light, or to deepen their knowledge of something. So yes, we're focusing on choreography, but don't let that be all you're focusing on right now, because I think, like I said, that we would miss out on a huge, huge part of the learning. And I think something that we want to continue to ask ourselves right now is like, yes, we are in this season, but how do we continue to inspire? And how do we continue to instill growth? Because when we're setting recital pieces, I feel like there's more time for pause within the class. Because like maybe we're working with this group right here and we're doing some type of layering in our choreography, and then we're switching or whatnot. So there's some downtime in the class. So how can we be effective in that? How can we also be outside of the choreography what our students are needing to propel? Because if we think, okay, your skills learning is done in fall and winter, and now we're learning a recital piece and closing out the year, that is still a section of the year that we can continue to push our students, again, being mindful of the energy and the abilities that we have. So one thing that I mentioned here is changing up your warm-up. And what I like to do, so a lot of my students do compete, they are on the team. And so they're going out on the weekend and they're getting critiques and they're getting feedback. And so that's important, yes, to bring back into the pieces as you're in your rehearsals and whatnot. But within your technique classes, I think it's very important to bring those critiques in as well. And even if there are students within your class that are not on the competition team, they're going to benefit from this as well. And if you don't do competition, as a teacher, maybe this is a great time of year to really also think about like, not that you're giving your students critiques or whatnot, but like a reflection and assessment. We're getting close to the end of our year. What is it that you had set out to accomplish that maybe needs to be checked in at? And how are we doing that student by student? So with the critiques, with the reflection, with the assessment that we're doing here, I start to cater my warm-up and my center skills to that. So, for example, one of the comments that we were getting a lot in a previous event was about the pelvis and about the energy, the sitting into, the pulling up and out of, the awareness, the connection of that. And so what did I do for a warm-up? I got everybody right into the floor. I began with some Pilates fundamentals that like specifically target the pelvis, like clockwork. And we did some bridge work. We did, just the awareness even too of like how it feels to inhale up, feeling everything rise, and that exhale sinking down, just sitting in a crisscross position, things like that. And so moving breath through the body. We also, another critique that was really common was resistance, making sure that we're finding and creating that resistance with our limbs through space, that we're not just placing the limbs. And that's one I love. And I think it's one that I feel like we continually work on, because I think it's also like a body awareness skill for many students, because we're so used to like trying to find, create, and make these pictures and these lines, but you can make it, but how are you fulfilling it? And an image that is really helpful for me that I use within improv exercises to help guide this, or even just in a seated moment in class as you're working through things and just being aware of this as a cue, is I like to talk about the body like the shell or outline of like a coloring book. So if your body was just the lines of, the shell of you, if we're filling in those areas and we are bringing energy through those areas, how does that feel when we're actually moving our arm out? How does it feel when we're actually extending through our legs? And it's that filling concept that I feel really helps students to understand the concept of resistance more, because we could talk about, putting our arms out in space and feeling the press against the air that is around us and the presence of that air around us. But it also has to come from within. And so that's why I really like the shell image, or the filling out and filling in image. And I find that one really helpful. So like I said, starting the class, taking the warm-up, taking the center skills as a result of the critiques, the reflection, or the assessment that either you are doing or that judges are doing for your students at competition. Because that is then taking what we have heard into the studio space in a very important and focused manner. If we're getting critiques on the weekends, we want to think about like, these are given to us to help us grow. So how can we put that onto us then back in the classroom during the week, and making it important and making it have value? Another thing that I really like to do too, sometimes just to change it up, is especially on Mondays after a long weekend, think about what else we can do to expand the dancer's knowledge that is not giving that like full out hard technical jazz class, because their bodies are probably not ready for that. Their minds are not ready for that. And we can still do a lot of learning and promote a lot of growth when we try different subject areas. So maybe we're coming in with some different thoughts to speak on, maybe some dance history. Maybe we're coming in with some different conditioning practices, like I said, that connect to the critiques, or your own assessment, like I said, if you're not doing competition, things like that. Sometimes, depending on the dancer's schedule too, I like to do a backwards class. I only do this if the dancers have had a class prior to mine, because I feel there is an incredible importance and value in warm up. So if the dancers have a class right before mine and they're fully warm and they're coming into class, maybe I'll start with recital choreography then. And then maybe I will finish the class with a cool down or a reflection of skills assessment that we have. Like maybe there's a skill within the recital dance that I'm seeing that I want to take some more time on. So we start with the choreography. We get to a point where we're like, okay, we're done recital choreography for today. Now let's do some focused skill work or the cool down. And I think that, just finding value in whatever we can bring into the classroom experience is just so important. And so, like I said, if you're feeling an inspiration at this time of year. If you're feeling like a push to do something differently, or you're feeling this energy that, okay, I want to go into class today and just like totally do something we haven't ever done before and kind of guide the class through this experience, I say act on it. And the reason why is because I think it not only benefits you and the creative spark that you are feeling, but it's going to benefit the dancers too, who maybe feel like they're on an endless loop of school, dance, repeat kind of thing, And another thing that has like really been so helpful to me this season is not forcing and just allowing things to flow. As I mentioned in the beginning of this episode, I feel when I am able to give my time and dedication to what I'm feeling most inspired by, it really holds value way more than I'm just showing up continually. Now, of course, I believe consistency is important. Consistency, dedication, hard work. Yes, absolutely. And yes, we need to show up on the days that we don't want to. Of course. But what I'm saying is, sometimes if we are acting more on the impulses of the inspiration, we're going to feel more invested in that than just sort of like going through the motions. So give yourself the permission to flow and not to force at this time of year and see what happens. Sometimes I feel that forcing continually can also like lead to feelings of burnout because it's just this constant hustle type of energy. And that might not be suitable for you, and it might not be suitable for your students either. So being aware of the energy that is in front of you and being aware of the inspiration that you're feeling inside as you go into these classes, I think is hugely important. Changing up your music this time of year can be great too. Sometimes people may have like a playlist they use seasonally, like here's our fall warm-ups, here's our winter warm-ups, here's our spring warm-ups. So changing it up. Don't allow yourself to get stuck in the loop because it could easily become monotonous for you. Finding ways that brings new light, just like the season that we're in. There's more light. There is this feeling of newness, fresh start, bringing that energy into your classroom. And if I can think of any other ones too that are reminders for how we should go into our spring season, I will add them over on my Instagram at Dance Teacher Pep Talk. So make sure you follow over there. And I want to thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. I will be back on again when I'm feeling most inspired and ready with some valuable thoughts for you all. And if you feel called to rate or review today's episode, that gets the message out there of the podcast to other dance teachers just like you who may be seeking inspiration. And again, I want to thank you so much for your love and support, and we'll talk soon.